The helicopter blades cut through the thick Afghan air as Team 7 descended toward the remote village of Khost. Dust swirled beneath their boots as they touched down, weapons ready, scanning the horizon for any sign of Taliban movement. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison adjusted his night vision goggles and signaled his team forward. The mission was supposed to be routine: extract intelligence from a suspected weapons cache and return to base before dawn. But nothing in Afghanistan was ever truly routine. Petty Officer Marcus "Doc" Rodriguez carried his medical kit alongside his rifle, his eyes constantly sweeping the terrain. As the team's corpsman, he had seen more blood and suffering than most men twice his age. His hands were steady, his mind sharp, and his reputation for keeping his teammates alive was legendary among the SEALs. The village appeared deserted as they moved through the narrow alleyways. Most inhabitants had fled when the fighting intensified weeks ago, leaving behind empty homes and abandoned dreams. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the distant howl of wind through broken windows. Sergeant First Class Tommy Chen raised his fist, bringing the team to an immediate halt. His trained ear had caught something the others missed, a faint sound coming from a collapsed building ahead. Morrison crept forward, his heart rate steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Inside the rubble of what had once been a small house, they found her. She was buried beneath chunks of concrete and twisted metal, her dark hair matted with dust and dried blood. Her clothes were torn and dirty, making it impossible to determine her nationality or occupation. She couldn't have been more than 25 years old, yet her eyes held a depth that suggested she had seen far more than her years should allow. Doc Rodriguez immediately dropped to his knees beside her, his medical training taking over. She was conscious but barely responsive, her breathing shallow and labored. A large piece of debris had pinned her left leg, and blood seeped from multiple cuts across her arms and face. "Easy there," Doc whispered in English, then repeated it in broken Pashto. "We're here to help." She looked up at him with striking green eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. She wasn't screaming, wasn't crying, wasn't even whimpering despite what must have been excruciating pain. The silence was unnerving. Morrison knelt on the other side, studying the woman's face. Something about her didn't fit. Her bone structure suggested she might be European or American, but she could have been from any number of countries. In this region, people's heritage was often a complex mix of ethnicities. "Doc, how bad is it?" Morrison asked quietly, his eyes never leaving the woman's face. Rodriguez carefully examined her injuries, while the rest of the team maintained security around the building. The leg was definitely broken, possibly in multiple places. She had lost blood, but not enough to be life-threatening if they acted quickly. What concerned him more was the possibility of internal injuries from the building collapse. "She needs immediate evacuation," Doc reported. "Broken leg, possible internal bleeding, multiple lacerations. She's stable for now, but that could change fast." As Rodriguez worked to stabilize her injuries, he noticed something strange. Despite the obvious pain she must be experiencing, the woman's breathing remained controlled, almost methodical. Her pulse was elevated, but not as much as he would expect from someone in her condition. Most civilians would be panicking, crying, begging for help in their native language. This woman did none of that. Chen approached from his position near the door. "Commander, we need to move. Intel suggests Taliban forces are moving through this area. If they find us here..." Morrison nodded, but his attention remained focused on their unexpected discovery. The mission parameters hadn't included civilian rescue, but he couldn't leave an injured woman to die. It went against everything he stood for as both a soldier and a human being. "Can we move her, Doc?" Rodriguez had improvised a splint for her leg using debris from the collapsed building and strips torn from his own shirt. "It's risky, but staying here is riskier. We need to get her to the extraction point." As they prepared to lift her, the woman finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the words were clear and unexpected. "Thank you." Perfect English. No accent, no broken grammar. The team members exchanged glances. Morrison leaned closer, studying her face more intently. "What's your name?" She closed her eyes briefly, as if deciding how much to reveal. When she opened them again, that same piercing stare met his. "Sarah." "Sarah what?" A long pause. "Just Sarah." Rodriguez gently lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. Most people would have cried out in pain from the movement, but Sarah simply pressed her lips together and endured it in silence. Her eyes remained alert, constantly scanning their surroundings as if assessing threats and escape routes. The team moved quickly through the village toward their extraction point. Morrison led the way, while Rodriguez carried Sarah, her arms wrapped around his neck for support. She held on tightly but never once complained about the jarring movement across the rough terrain. Halfway to the landing zone, Chen suddenly raised his hand again. In the distance, they could hear the rumble of vehicles approaching. Taliban forces were moving faster than anticipated. "Double time," Morrison ordered quietly. As they picked up the pace, Sarah spoke again, her voice stronger now. "There are 3 trucks, 12 to 15 fighters. They have an RPG." The entire team froze. Morrison turned to stare at her. "How could you possibly know that?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I can hear them." Doc Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. He had been in enough combat situations to know that kind of tactical assessment required training. Serious training, the type of training that civilians didn't possess. "Who are you?" Morrison demanded, his voice low but urgent. Before Sarah could answer, the sound of gunfire erupted from behind them. The Taliban had reached the village and discovered signs of their presence. The hunt was on. Morrison made a split-second decision. "Run!" They sprinted across the open ground toward the extraction point, Rodriguez still carrying Sarah despite the additional weight slowing him down. Behind them, angry shouts in Pashto grew closer as their pursuers gave chase. The helicopter was already spinning up its rotors when they reached the landing zone. The pilot had heard the gunfire and knew they needed to leave immediately. Morrison and Chen provided covering fire while Rodriguez carried Sarah toward the aircraft. As bullets whistled overhead, Sarah did something that made Doc Rodriguez's blood run cold. While still in his arms, she calmly assessed the enemy positions and called out tactical information to the SEALs. "Muzzle flash, 2 o'clock, approximately 200 meters. Single shooter behind the stone wall. Secondary position at your 4 o'clock, 3 shooters using the irrigation ditch for cover." Her observations were precise, professional, and absolutely accurate. Morrison dove behind cover and keyed his radio. "How the hell does she know that?" Rodriguez had no answer. He was too busy trying to process what he had just witnessed. As he carried Sarah up the helicopter's ramp, she continued to provide tactical updates with the calm precision of a trained operator. The helicopter lifted off just as RPG fire streaked past their position. Safe in the aircraft, the team finally had a moment to catch their breath and really look at the woman they had rescued. Sarah sat quietly in the jump seat, her injured leg extended, her hands folded in her lap. Despite everything they had just been through, she appeared remarkably composed. Most civilians would be shaking, crying, or in shock. Sarah looked like she was analyzing the mission they had just completed. Doc Rodriguez knelt beside her to check her injuries during the flight. As he examined her leg more thoroughly, he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. Faded but unmistakable, he could see the edge of a tattoo on her shoulder, partially hidden beneath her torn shirt. It was a tattoo he recognized, a tattoo that no civilian should have. His hands trembled slightly as he continued his examination, his mind racing with implications he didn't want to consider. When Sarah noticed his change in demeanor, she looked directly into his eyes. "You have good hands," she said quietly. "Medical training?" "Navy corpsman," he replied automatically, then immediately regretted revealing that information. A slight smile crossed her face. "I thought so. You work like someone who's seen combat." The way she said it sent chills through Rodriguez. She wasn't guessing. She knew exactly what combat medical experience looked like because she had seen it before. As the helicopter carried them toward the base, Doc Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they had just rescued someone who might be far more dangerous than the enemy they had left behind. Sarah closed her eyes and leaned back against the bulkhead, finally allowing exhaustion to show on her face. But even as she rested, Rodriguez noticed her hands remained positioned in a way that would allow quick access to any weapon within reach. Old habits, he thought grimly. The kind of habits that only came from very specific, very dangerous training. Morrison caught Rodriguez's eye and nodded toward Sarah, his expression questioning. Rodriguez shook his head slightly, indicating they should wait until they reached base to discuss their concerns. But privately, Doc Rodriguez was beginning to suspect that their routine mission had just become anything but routine. The woman they had rescued was carrying secrets that could change everything. And as the helicopter flew through the night toward safety, he wondered if they had just saved an innocent civilian or brought something much more complicated back to their base. The base medical facility was sterile and bright compared to the dusty chaos they had left behind in the village. Doc Rodriguez wheeled Sarah into the examination room while Morrison briefed the commanding officer on their unexpected passenger. The overhead fluorescent lights revealed details that the darkness had hidden. Sarah lay quietly on the examination table as Rodriguez began a more thorough assessment of her injuries. She watched his every movement with those sharp green eyes, as if cataloging his techniques and procedures. Most patients would be asking questions about their condition or expressing concern about the pain. Sarah did neither. "I'm going to need to cut away your shirt to properly examine your injuries," Rodriguez explained, reaching for medical scissors. "Of course," she replied simply, showing no modesty or concern that would be typical of most civilians in such a situation. As Rodriguez carefully cut away the fabric, more of that tattoo became visible. His hands stopped moving when he saw it completely. It was a small but intricate design on her left shoulder blade, an eagle with spread wings clutching a trident, surrounded by a rope border. Beneath it were numbers that made his blood run cold. It was a Navy SEAL trident. Rodriguez had seen enough of them to know the real thing when he saw it. The detail was perfect, the placement correct, and the accompanying numbers suggested a date and team designation. But that was impossible. The Navy SEALs were an all-male unit. Women weren't allowed in combat roles, much less in special operations. Sarah noticed him staring and turned her head to see what had caught his attention. When she saw where his gaze was focused, her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "Interesting tattoo for a civilian," Rodriguez said carefully, his voice neutral. "I like nautical themes," she replied, but her tone suggested the conversation was over. Rodriguez continued his examination. But his mind was racing. The tattoo, her tactical knowledge during the firefight, her pain tolerance, her overall demeanor, nothing added up to an innocent civilian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. As he checked her reflexes, he noticed something else unusual. When he tested her knee reflex with the small rubber hammer, her leg responded normally. But when he deliberately tried to surprise her by tapping her other knee without warning, she had already tensed the muscle in anticipation. Her body was reading his movements and preparing for them before they happened. "Have you had medical training?" he asked directly. "Basic first aid," she answered, but the way she said it suggested there was much more to the story. Rodriguez began cleaning the cuts on her arms and face. The lacerations were mostly superficial, but as he worked, he noticed that several of the newer cuts were clean and precise, too clean for debris from a building collapse. They looked more like knife wounds. "Sarah, these cuts on your arms, they don't look like they came from the building collapse." She looked down at the wounds he was indicating. For a moment, her composure slipped slightly, and he caught a glimpse of something that might have been fear or anger in her eyes. "Things were confusing when the building came down," she said carefully. "I don't remember everything clearly." But Rodriguez could tell she remembered perfectly. Every detail. The way she avoided eye contact when she said it confirmed his suspicion that she was hiding something significant. The door opened, and Morrison entered with Chief Petty Officer Williams, a grizzled veteran who had served with SEAL teams for over 15 years. Williams took one look at Sarah, and his expression hardened. "Doc, we need to talk," Williams said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Rodriguez glanced at Sarah, who was watching the exchange with keen interest. "I'll be right back," he told her. "Try to rest." In the hallway outside the medical room, Williams pulled Morrison and Rodriguez aside. His expression was grim. "I ran her description through our intelligence networks," Williams began quietly. "A woman matching her appearance has been linked to several high-value target operations in this region over the past 6 months. The locals call her the Ghost." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "What kind of operations?" "Precision strikes against Taliban leadership. Someone with advanced combat skills has been systematically eliminating key figures in the insurgency. Always at night, always surgical, always disappearing without a trace." Rodriguez felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "Chief, she's got a SEAL trident tattoo. And I mean a real one, not some fake souvenir." Williams stared at him. "That's impossible." "I know what I saw. The detail is perfect, and there are numbers that look like a date and team designation." Morrison was processing this information rapidly. "So we're looking at a woman with SEAL-level training who's been conducting unauthorized operations in our area of operations? Or," Williams said grimly, "we're looking at someone who's been impersonating military personnel while conducting assassinations." Through the small window in the medical room door, they could see Sarah still lying quietly on the examination table, but now she appeared to be studying the room's layout, noting the positions of exits, medical equipment that could be used as weapons, and sight lines to the hallway. Rodriguez realized she was conducting a tactical assessment of her environment. "We need to find out who she really is," Morrison decided, "but carefully. If she's as dangerous as you suspect—" "Sir," Rodriguez interrupted, "there's something else. Her medical knowledge. When I was examining her, she knew exactly what I was looking for before I did it. Her muscle responses indicate advanced tactical training, and those cuts on her arms, they're knife wounds, not building debris injuries." Williams nodded grimly, "which means she was in a fight before that building came down. The question is whether she was fighting Taliban or fighting someone else." They returned to the medical room to find Sarah sitting up on the examination table, despite Rodriguez's instructions to rest. She had somehow managed to fashion a more secure bandage around her leg using supplies from the medical cart. "Feeling better?" Morrison asked casually, but his hand had unconsciously moved closer to his sidearm. "Much, thank you." Sarah's voice remained calm and pleasant. "Dr. Rodriguez does excellent work." "I'm not a doctor," Rodriguez corrected. "Just a corpsman." Sarah tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Marcus Rodriguez, graduated from Field Medical Training Battalion Camp Pendleton, deployed 3 times to Afghanistan, twice to Iraq. Specialized in trauma surgery and battlefield medicine." The room went completely silent. Rodriguez felt ice water in his veins. How could you possibly know that? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Lucky guess. But it wasn't a guess, and everyone in the room knew it. She had just recited information that wasn't available to civilians, information that would require access to military personnel records or extensive intelligence gathering. Morrison stepped forward, his voice taking on a more authoritative tone. Sarah, I think it's time you told us who you really are. She looked at each of them in turn, as if assessing how much they suspected and how much she could continue to hide. Finally, she spoke. I'm exactly who I said I am. My name is Sarah. Sarah what? Williams demanded. A long pause. Sarah Mitchell. Morrison pulled out a notepad. Date of birth? October 15th, 1987. Place of birth? Another pause, slightly longer this time. Denver, Colorado. Williams was already pulling out his satellite phone to run the information through military databases. Rodriguez continued to study Sarah's face, noting the micro-expressions that suggested she was calculating each answer before giving it. Military service? Morrison continued. None, she answered quickly. Too quickly. Rodriguez knew she was lying. Everything about her screamed military training. The way she held herself, the way she assessed threats, her pain tolerance, her medical knowledge. It all pointed to someone with extensive combat experience. Sarah, Rodriguez said gently, you're safe here. Whatever you're running from, whatever happened to you out there, we want to help. But we need to know what we're dealing with. For the first time since they found her, Sarah's composure cracked slightly. Rodriguez saw fear flash across her face, quickly replaced by something that looked like resignation. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, she said quietly. Try us, Morrison replied. Sarah closed her eyes and was quiet for so long that Rodriguez thought she might have fallen asleep. When she opened them again, there was a determination there that hadn't been present before. I need to speak with whoever's in charge of classified operations on this base. Williams raised an eyebrow. Why would a civilian need to speak with intelligence personnel? Sarah looked directly at him, and for a moment, Rodriguez saw the soldier hiding beneath the civilian facade. Because what I'm about to tell you could compromise ongoing operations that you don't even know exist. The three men exchanged glances. Whatever Sarah Mitchell really was, she was far more than the injured civilian they had rescued. And Rodriguez was beginning to suspect that their biggest challenge wouldn't be keeping her safe from the Taliban. It would be keeping her from disappearing into the night before they could learn the truth about who she really was. Colonel James Harrison arrived at the medical facility within 20 minutes of Williams's call. Rodriguez had never seen the base commander move so quickly for a civilian casualty. As Harrison entered the room, his expression was grim, and his security detail remained conspicuously close. Sarah looked up as he approached. And Rodriguez noticed something he hadn't seen before. Recognition passed between them. Hello, Sarah, Harrison said quietly. Colonel. Her voice carried a tone of respect that confirmed Rodriguez's growing suspicions. Harrison turned to Morrison and his team. Gentlemen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Before we proceed, I need your word that nothing discussed here leaves this room. The three SEALs nodded their agreement, though Rodriguez could see the confusion and concern in their eyes. Harrison pulled up a chair beside the examination table. Petty Officer Rodriguez, your instincts were correct. This woman does have legitimate claim to that SEAL Trident tattoo. Morrison stepped forward. Sir, that's impossible. Women aren't officially allowed in SEAL teams, Harrison finished. That's correct. But sometimes, Lieutenant Commander, the official policy doesn't cover every situation the military faces. Sarah shifted on the examination table, wincing slightly as her injured leg moved. Colonel, they deserve to know what they walked into out there. Harrison nodded. Sarah Mitchell is not her real name. This woman is Lieutenant Sarah Chen. Yes, relation to your Sergeant First Class Tommy Chen, his younger sister. She's part of a classified program that has been running for the past 3 years. Tommy Chen's face went white. Sarah? My sister Sarah? But she's supposed to be in military intelligence stationed in Virginia. She was, Harrison continued, until she volunteered for something that officially doesn't exist. A program designed to place female operators in deep cover within regions where male soldiers cannot effectively operate. Rodriguez felt the pieces finally clicking into place. She's been undercover as a local civilian. For 8 months, Harrison confirmed. Living in various villages, gathering intelligence on Taliban operations, and when necessary, eliminating high-value targets that conventional forces couldn't reach. Williams leaned forward. The ghost. The locals' stories about precision strikes. Sarah spoke for the first time since Harrison arrived. I was inserted to infiltrate a Taliban cell planning attacks on coalition forces. The intelligence I gathered prevented 17 planned operations against our bases. Morrison was struggling to process this information. But the injuries, the building collapse, was real, Sarah said. My cover was blown 3 days ago. A Taliban commander named Hakim Rashid discovered my identity. I barely escaped his compound, but not before eliminating him and retrieving crucial intelligence about a planned attack on this base. She reached into her torn jacket and withdrew a small data storage device. Everything is on here. Troop movements, weapons caches, the complete structure of Taliban operations in this region. Harrison took the device, his expression showing both relief and concern. We've been trying to reach you for 72 hours. When you missed your extraction window, I was compromised, Sarah explained. Rashid's men were hunting me. I couldn't risk exposing the extraction team. So I went to ground in the village, planning to wait for another opportunity. Rodriguez finally understood. The knife wounds. You were fighting Rashid's men before the building collapsed. 2 of them tracked me to the house. I eliminated them both, but not before taking some damage. Then an RPG hit the building during the firefight. When the structure came down, it actually saved my life by hiding me from the rest of their search team. Tommy Chen sat down heavily in a nearby chair. Sarah, when we were kids, you always said you wanted to be a soldier like me. But this is exactly what I trained for, Sarah finished gently. Tommy, I went through the same selection process as your SEAL team, the same training, the same standards. The only difference is that my missions require me to disappear into civilian populations where male operators would be immediately identified as threats. Harrison stood up. The program is highly classified because it pushes the boundaries of current military policy. These women undergo SEAL training but operate under different command structures and mission parameters. Morrison was beginning to understand the implications. How many others? That's classified, Harrison replied firmly. But Sarah is one of our most successful operators. Her intelligence has been invaluable to operations throughout the region. Rodriguez looked at Sarah with new respect. The pain tolerance, the tactical knowledge, the way you assessed threats during our extraction, it all makes sense now. I apologize for the deception, Sarah said, looking at each of them in turn. But my cover story had to be maintained until I could be properly debriefed. Williams stepped forward. Ma'am, that was some of the most professional tactical assessment I've ever heard under fire. Your intel during the extraction probably saved our lives. Sarah smiled for the first time since they had found her. You gentlemen did the heavy lifting. I just tried to be helpful. Tommy Chen approached his sister's bedside, still processing the revelation. Sarah, Mom and Dad think you're pushing papers in an office in Virginia. And they need to continue thinking that, Sarah replied seriously. Tommy, you can't tell them what you learned today, not ever. He nodded, understanding the weight of operational security. Are you okay? I mean, really okay? Rodriguez checked her chart. Physically, She'll recover completely. The leg will need a few weeks to heal properly, but there's no permanent damage. Harrison consulted his watch. Sarah, we need to get you debriefed and then extracted to a secure medical facility. Your mission here is complete, and frankly, the region is too hot for you to return to operations anytime soon. What about the intelligence on the device? Morrison asked. Will be processed immediately, Harrison assured him. Thanks to Lieutenant Chen's work, we'll be able to prevent the attack they were planning and roll up most of their network in this area. As they prepared Sarah for transport to a larger medical facility, Rodriguez felt compelled to speak. Lieutenant Chen, for what it's worth, you're one of the toughest operators I've ever treated. The way you handled pain, assessed threats, and maintained your cover even when injured, it was textbook. Sarah extended her hand to shake his. Thank you, Doc. Your medical skills are pretty impressive, too. And thank you for not asking too many questions until it was safe to answer them. Morrison stepped forward as well. Ma'am, it was an honor to work with you, even if we didn't know it at the time. The honor was mine, Lieutenant Commander. Your team's professionalism under fire made all the difference. As they prepared to wheel Sarah out to the transport helicopter, Tommy Chen walked alongside his sister. Sarah, when this is all over, when you're ready to come home, I'll always be your little sister, she assured him. Just one who happens to have some unusual job skills. Rodriguez watched as the helicopter lifted off, carrying Sarah to her debriefing and medical treatment. The base seemed quieter somehow, as if a significant presence had just departed. Morrison joined him outside the medical facility. Doc, in all your years as a corpsman, have you ever treated anyone like her? Rodriguez thought about the question. No, sir. But I hope if I'm ever injured behind enemy lines, someone with her skills and courage finds me. Williams approached them both. Gentlemen, I don't think I need to remind you that this entire incident is classified. Understood, Chief, Morrison replied. But it makes you think about how much we don't know about what's really happening out here. As the three SEALs returned to their duties, Rodriguez couldn't shake his admiration for what he had witnessed. Sarah Chen had endured months of isolation, constant danger, and finally serious injury, all while maintaining her cover and continuing her mission. She had been trained to the same standards as the elite warriors he served with, but asked to do something even more challenging, to operate completely alone in enemy territory, with no backup and no recognition for her service. Later that evening, Rodriguez received a message through official channels. Sarah's debriefing had revealed intelligence that led to the immediate capture of 12 Taliban operatives and the prevention of a coordinated attack on 3 coalition bases. The quiet woman they had pulled from the rubble had just saved hundreds of lives. Rodriguez smiled as he filed his medical report, making sure to note that their patient had made a full recovery. Officially, they had treated an injured civilian named Sarah Mitchell. Unofficially, they had been honored to serve alongside one of the most courageous soldiers any of them had ever met. The mission had been labeled routine, but Rodriguez knew better now. In their line of work, nothing was ever truly routine. Sometimes the most important operations were the ones that officially never happened at all. And sometimes, the heroes were the ones whose names would never appear in any history book, whose sacrifices would never be publicly acknowledged, but whose courage made all the difference in the world.